Hey friends, and welcome to this week's episode of the U-Turn Podcast. This is your host, Ashley Stahl. I'm a counterterrorism professional turned career coach, speaker, and Forbes blogger, and I created the U-Turn Podcast because, let's face it, every now and again we realize that we're living life on autopilot and it's time to wake up and make that U-turn in your life. So prepare to go deep with some of the most transformational people I know, here to help you grow and upgrade your mindset, whether it's in work or love. Also, be sure to stick around for the end of every episode where I'm going to reflect on the conversation and offer actionable coaching insights to have a real impact on your life. In the meantime, we've opened up access to 3 free e-courses on uturnpodcast.com. So head on over there if you want to land a new job you love, find your purpose, or launch your dream business. All of these courses are totally free. All you got to do is head on over to uturnpodcast.com. That's YOUTURN podcast.com. Now let's get started with this week's guest.
We are so used to functioning from an intellectual place to exercise other parts of our brain. We really have to pause and hear ourselves and hear what our information systems are trying to tell us before we go out and solicit advice from friends, which is always a good idea, but most of us are really doing that way more than we need to, and it's not helping us manage our energy systems or find how much power we can have to actually solve the problems if we pause for a moment. There's nothing wrong with relying on friends and getting support. It's actually a good idea, but to access your intuition, it is helpful to actually really just be with yourself and be as intimate with yourself as possible.
Hey U-Turners, it's Ashley Stahl here. As per usual, I'm keeping it weird with yet another friend of mine who is going to be a profound guest on the pod today. We've got Noah Berman. He is a master of intuition and a medium. And I figured who better to bring on than to talk about how we can access our intuition, because we've all been there before. We intuitively think something, we ignore it, and then it happens. And I think that we all would be so much happier if we could access it and trust it more. Before we even get into that, Noah, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I should be thanking you guys. You weren't here before we started recording, but he came in when I was having a bit of a meltdown, just broke up with somebody, or stopped seeing somebody and was like, what is he thinking right now, Noah? So, okay, how to access your intuition. For everybody listening, what is intuition?
Intuition, for me, rather, in my definition, intuition is just knowing things without knowing how or why you know. Okay. And it's information that comes from a place that's not intellectual or logical. And when we're not using that part of our brain, it's information that actually can show up very quickly. And very specifically oftentimes. But I would say the reason we're often not experiencing or accessing it is because we're trying to understand something intellectually, right? Because you can't understand something that is spiritual and that it's too great, right? It's beyond our understanding. And so there's no intellectual comprehension there. It just seems to show up, and it's just one of many information systems we have, just like touching something or feeling something or tasting something. And it's very real, and it shows up in different ways for different people. For me, I would say what's strongest is just a stream of consciousness that I would describe as just like appearing as my own thoughts, that started at a very young age. So even at age 6 or 7, I would notice things where I would, like at the library or at the elementary school, I would always just type in passwords and they'd be right. And I wouldn't even say it was guessing. It was just, I knew the password and I didn't know why. And I always was just like, oh, I'm smart. I pick things up quickly. And then when I got older, I started to realize, like 9 or 10, I would ask my parents questions like, why is it that people that are mean or that treat children badly, that they smell differently? Because I was getting other information systems that were olfactorily, my smell. I would get information about people through the smell.
So if they're mean, they kind of smell like shit?
At that age, especially, or if they didn't like children or they had negative energy toward children as a child, I was sensitive to that. And then when I was 17, I predicted information about a sexual assault. So I had said to one of my friends, I really feel like, this person in your family was sexually molested. I think this is the person that did it, and I think that this person will come forward in 3 weeks. And everything that I said came true to a T. And after it came true, it was almost like some kind of veil was lifted or being exposed, where people, you know, even a week afterwards, someone came up to me and said, "You seem really intuitive. Can I start asking you questions?" And I was noticing more and more of a heightened sense of awareness, and just it went from something being unconscious, where I was like hanging out with a friend smoking pot when I was a teenager and like words coming out of my mouth, to, oh wait, something's actually going on. And that's when it really switched from, you know, I pick up things quickly, I'm a bright kid, to, okay, I'm actually just really knowing and feeling other people's lives and experiences a lot. And I don't really know why, but I'm going to keep trying to figure it out. And I remember the first startup I was with, it was like one of my first or second weeks in the job, and it was like the CFO was talking in like a cab, and he was like, yeah, my mom had me, and I was like, she had you when you were 30. And I didn't know why I was finishing a sentence and all these things, and I realized that it's freaking other people out, and I tried to not talk about it. And then in 2014, I predicted an explosion in Harlem the day before it happened, and one of my coworkers lived 3 blocks away. So after that, and people in the office finding out, it like wasn't really a secret anymore, and I just started being more open, and people just started reaching out. It was like an energy or some kind of antenna. You know, people just started finding me more after I stopped being afraid or ashamed of who I am, ultimately. But, you know, what's the question is, what is intuition? Yeah, for me, it's mostly just a stream or channel of information that comes through that's words that feel like my own thoughts or my own, but they're really not, because they're coming too quickly for them to be. But it also shows up, you know, smell, as I described, or other senses. You know, our third eye, our vision, will see things or have visions, and that can show up in when you're conscious or even in your dreams. And, you know, really, I think that in our experience, there's information that's always being provided to us to help support us and guide us and get us closer to our truth. It's our own sensitivity and receptivity to actually what's already there. And we're accessing something by working less, not by working more.
Creating that stillness. You know, a couple things. It's like listening to you. It's kind of like we're these bundles of cells, and I feel like there's so much happening in the invisible that people... that we all buy into this belief that we are limited by our 5 senses. But I've always believed that we're like these energetic, like octopi. Is that the plural, where we kind of feel things in our cells around our bodies, and we pick up things. And I think that's why, you know, if those of you listening, it's like, you know, have you ever left your house in a really good mood, and then you get on the metro or something, and you get off and you're in a really bad mood, and you're like, why? And it's like a lot of times you're picking up other people's energy or thoughts or feelings. A lot of people are empaths, and so I think that empaths probably get overloaded and shut off this part of them that can feel or know things. I'm curious, like, for anybody listening who is a really sensitive person, what are your thoughts on empaths who are listening?
I think that every energy is always an invitation, right? So if someone else is depressed and they're around you, in many ways they're inviting you into their depression. And that's an invitation because some part of that soul wants to feel stood and understand and validated, so you can reach in and lift them out of that depression. Because when people are not expressing in a well or healing state, they're asking for healing. You know, if someone exposes themselves as afraid or bigoted, really they're saying, I'm hurting, please help me. In my epistemology, my perspective, if someone's voicing themselves as hurting, or they're expressing in a way where there's pain or sadness or depression, because in some way it's an invitation for you to help them and to heal them. And you don't necessarily have to agree or engage with that energy. You can broadcast whatever you want. And if you truly are coming from a place of authentic joy, which doesn't mean that you necessarily feel great, but just it's good to be here. I'd rather be here than not be here. It's good to be alive because I'm still being gifted with an experience on this earth that doesn't need to feel good. If you trust that the things that don't feel good are actually put there to help you grow and become more of yourself. But yeah, if you're hypersensitive, it's super easy to pick up on other people's stuff. But usually that's happening because there's some of your own stuff that's uncomfortable to look at. So you're absorbing other people's stuff, because it's not benevolent or healing to pick up with other people's energy if you're not in a strong place. It's only empathic if you can harness the energy in such a way to lift people out of it. Otherwise, we're all just getting pulled down by a negative weight, right? So that will always be there, and you always can feel other people's negativity, and you can always get pulled into it. But the more conscious we become, the more we really realize that everything is a choice, regardless of where we're starting from, and that we don't necessarily have to engage or pull down by when other people aren't feeling well, and that it's actually not our job to feel bad for other people or pity them, because that doesn't help empower them, and it doesn't get them out of where they're at if you're not there, right? And it can be sensitive to someone's pain and also know that in some way it's there for a reason, that the things that look ugly are actually oftentimes doing us a service as a teacher to help us evolve, and that I think it's culturally endemic that we're always trying to beautify and fix and make things look a certain way so that everyone feels comfortable, but that's actually not always what we're needing to grow. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to react to it or believe that it's real or take it on.
That
you can
is such
feel
a
someone's
point.
sadness and you can let it pass through you. I can feel someone's sadness and feel the pain in my heart for a couple seconds and ground into the earth and you say internally, thank you for allowing me to witness you. And ask for this person's healing. You can't control how they receive it, but we're all energy channels, and we all can send each other love. And whatever that does, I can't necessarily quantify, but I can feel is real.
I love what you just said, because I think we grew up in a world where socially, pain means don't. Or doubt means don't, or fear means don't.
Right.
And it's like what you're saying is sometimes a feeling is just passing through. And it reminds me of my favorite poem, Rumi's guest house poem, where all of your feelings are a guest house, or you're a guest house and all of your feelings are just visitors. And just listening to you, for everybody who's tuning in, I'm curious, when and how can someone right now, what is the first step to connect to their own intuition? I know before we started recording, we talked about not listening to other people. And I know we live in a very noisy world where we're taught doubt means don't, and we're taught all of these things about feelings.
I think other people are good. And generally, if you have people in your life, whether or not all of them are fun or making you comfortable, you chose those people, and they're good for you because they're the people you need to express yourself and be who you are. So it's not like, throw people out. It's just, we're so used to functioning from an intellectual place to exercise other parts of our brain. We really have to pause and hear ourselves and hear what our information systems are trying to tell us before we go out and solicit advice from friends, which is always a good idea. But most of us are really doing that way more than we need to, and it's not helping us manage our energy systems or find how much power we can have to actually solve the problems if we pause for a moment. There's nothing wrong with relying on friends and getting support. It's actually a good idea. But to access your intuition, it is helpful to actually really just be with yourself and be as intimate with yourself as possible, because it all has to do with your relationship with yourself.
And why do you think people, because I know I've been there, and there's so many people who operate and process information differently. I think for some people talking about it is healing. I think for some people not talking about it is what's healing, because for some of us talking about things is a way to avoid it or not even process it, right? So I'm curious, on your side, what can somebody do to start silencing, considering what people say, but start hearing themselves as well?
I think it comes to for taking a claim and a stand for yourself in your own life and deciding what you deserve for yourself and what you believe you're worthy of. I am worthy of a life where I'm going to face my trials head on. And, just like you said before about things that are painful or fearful, like a void, actually, the more we move toward the things that are painful and fearful, and the more we embrace and love the trials that we have and adopt a sense of wisdom that the things that we don't think are pretty in our life are actually the blessings that we need to evolve, then those problems minimize much more quickly. There will always be some kind of whack-a-mole because I'm always going to be given something else to grow. But I'm not going to get upset about it. the next time something ugly happens, I'm going to get really happy because I'm being trusted with another lesson that's cool. You know, the more we get upset or believe the things that are scary are really a threat to us, the more powerful they become. But it's all actually in our minds.
Well, I mean, that's like a whole nother level of me just flinging myself off an existential cliff. Like, you have no idea. Like, I've gotten to this exact stop sign with you, with myself. And I thought, like, wow, this shit's all made up, and how do I even trust my eyes to be seeing something? Or maybe it's all made up, and everybody sees things differently, and, you know.
And a lot of that's true. Yeah. How you perceive things is based on you. You know, it could be totally something else to someone else, even if it's the same thing.
Well, and then it goes into free will, and I'm like, is there such a thing, or do we come in with all of these influences on ourselves and on our being that... I mean, I could just go down a real rabbit hole with you right now.
I think, personally, my opinion is that we're always in choice. We're always responsible. But that there's a part of us, even before we come here, that wants to learn certain things and wants to express in certain ways. And regardless of what choice we make, to some extent, we really will be led closer to those experiences because that's what we're yearning to become. Right, is a fuller version of where we started, and that means that we'll be presented things to get there.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things you said before we started recording that I thought was so fascinating was this concept of rewinding the tape. So I would love for you to kind of walk us through how do we rewind the tape of our mind.
So let's take a situation that's not working, and I think that jobs and romantic relationships are really a good place to start because that's where we spend a lot of our time. And when those things aren't right, nothing else really feels that right. I mean, let's be honest here. Yeah. If our professional life or our personal life, in terms of our romantic relationships, gets thrown off, it just throws everything else off. So usually when there are problems with these things, we will get signs before it blows up. And those signs will be through our intuition. But I would also say, just almost through our experience of life communicating with us, that we will get signs or symbols or synchronicities oftentimes that will show us messages. And it's really just paying attention and being present. So, you know, stop listening to other people first, meaning don't listen to your friends, but stop listening to your friends for a while, really, so you can hear yourself and be present. And then once you're present here, you can, you know, I don't want people to be in their history and rewinding the tape, but where in your life up until this point has intuition been trying to communicate to you, and where maybe can you find examples where things blew up with a job or a relationship where you had a feeling before it happened, or there were indications before it happened, where maybe you didn't listen and then it got really bad. And that's useful not out of a place of regret or I should have done things differently, because I really feel like it's all unfolding the way it is for a reason. But this will show you where and how information in your life for you personally was trying to show up to warn you or to make this transition easier. And that will help you understand how your intuition is unique to you. Because rewinding the tape, you can see those moments and those experiences where you were getting signs or you were feeling something. And the way you feel it will be different than the way I feel it, or the way my friend I'm sitting next to feels it, because we all feel things differently, but we're all feeling something. So to be intimate with yourself, right, you have to know how your intuition works. And it's not about getting stuck in the past or regret. It's about understanding how your mind works so that you can get back to present and fine tune. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just so interesting. In my spiritual psychology master's program, they called intimacy Into Me I See. Have you heard that one?
No.
So if you, and every time people are like, get intimate with yourself, I'm like, into you see. Yeah. So
it is seeing, it's sight.
It is. It's a level of sight. But I think that we are, and this is kind of the premise of the book U-Turn that I'm trying to write right now, is everybody thinks they need clarity, but really that's not the problem. Clarity's already here. It's that we're not connected to ourselves enough to hear it, see it, or feel it.
What we need is to let go of the sense of needing, because that's not a sense that we're loved and that we're provided for. Right?
Fuck.
And you can't have really a sense of trust, which is where intuition comes from, if you feel like you need something. You really have to feel like you're being given something.
This is
all
making
the
me
time.
laugh because, like, right
It's
when you
true,
walked in,
but what you're being given is non-physical. It's not the guy. It's not the girl. It's not the thing. It's not the job. Those things come and go, and they'll wear different faces. They're all reflections of you. And if you're creating from a high place, it shouldn't be hard to manifest something you want. But it's
That's
not
actually
about
a really
those
complicated
things.
concept, I think. That's not something I've unpacked on this podcast. What do you mean by that? If you're creating from a high place, it's not hard to manifest what you want.
If you're really coming from a place of love for yourself and others,
Alignment, doing something you really want to do. No?
sure.
Okay.
But you can do something you really want to do, but if it's not coming from love, it's not really aligned, right? So if you're aligning your own personal will with a sense of love for other people, then you're aligned with a kind of an external energy and internal intention. So that's alignment as I see it. We all have our own understanding. I can't prove this, that's my belief, is what alignment is. But I also believe that if you're really coming from a place of I love myself and I love other people and I want to give, things will kind of work themselves out, that, you know, things can always turn around or show up in a place where you know you're functioning. If you really are coming from a place of how can I make myself better, make people around me better, make the world better, I believe that things will show up to support you in doing that. Because my belief system is that that's how it's worked so far in my life, and every person I've witnessed who wants it.
Yeah.
If you really want it, you can have it, but you got to be coming from the right place. Otherwise, you can't hold it as easily.
You know, this reminds me of when you walked in the door and we just started talking and catching up, is that I like to think I'm in alignment as far as, like, I hang out with people I want to hang out with. I take on projects career-wise that I want to do. But it's sometimes, and I think there's a lot of people listening that some people do like their job and they like their friends and they like their partner, but there's something that doesn't feel easy. Like, I don't always feel a sense of ease and grace, even though there has been for me when I really examine my life and my results. So I'm curious for anybody.
I don't think that we're here for things to be easy. I don't think that we're here to be happy all the time. I think that we need to go through different levels of discomfort to grow. And I think that things are painful sometimes.
Hey U-Turners, so sorry for the quick interruption, but I want to make sure you know that this episode has been brought to you by the Career Clarity Lab, the online course to help you find your career purpose in the workforce and upgrade your confidence. So if you're ready to unlock the best career path for you and you'd like to try a free version of our Clarity course, just head on over to youturnpodcast.com/clarity. That's YOUTURN podcast.com/clarity. Now let's get back to this week's episode. But not everybody feels this sense of being here to, like, I think everybody has different core values. We all come into our bodies differently. For me, I want connection, and that has been a healing force for some people in my life, that I want to be connected to them, and as a result, it makes an impact. But I haven't ever felt this sense of coming into, like, I felt like I've wanted to be a healing presence for people because it makes me feel good too. But I've never felt like I have a mission to, like, change the world or something like that, even if I am. That hasn't been, like, a motivator. So I'm hearing with you, it's like,
if you change yourself, it's impossible not to happen.
Yeah.
You don't need to feel like you're on a mission to change the world. The world doesn't necessarily need to be changed. If we open our hearts more and allow in more sensitivity, it will. But the sense of it needing to be changed is a sense that there's something broken that needs to be fixed. I don't feel like that's the way to go about it. What if it's already beautiful, but it can be augmented?
Well, so everybody listening, it's like, step one, stop listening to other people, value what they have to say, consider it, be mindful of it, and find presence to hear yourself. So one of my favorite ways to hear myself think is meditation, and I know it's on trend right now. I will tell you where I'm not on trend is I hate yoga. Like, yoga's like my worst nightmare. So thankfully I haven't gone to yoga. You should see me. I look like I'm about to, like, rob the place. Like, my eyes are, like, dodging around when I'm on the mat. I'm like, get me out of here. I don't know why. Like, I'm just, I guess I'm buzzing too much or something to settle into it, or I'm not that flexible. I don't know. But there's many ways to quiet your mind. Those of you listening, I downloaded Insight Timer app. And I have absolutely loved Sarah Blondin's meditations. One on accessing stillness. It's a totally free app, and if you want to blow your own mind, get noise canceling earphones and you won't be the same person. It's like a surround sound movie where you are going into this stillness, and it's incredible. I'm also curious though, Noah, what are some actionable, bite-sized, like if you try this, you can access stillness? Like maybe some people, nature is going to help them access their stillness.
Well, nature should almost always help everyone, for sure. Just it does. And I think even barefoot, careful if you're on the East Coast because of the ticks, and it actually increases levels of serotonin production and has been linked to lower levels of depression. And we absorb it through contact with soil, either through breathing it in, airborne through the soil, or touching the soil.
This is soil that kind of smells like shit when you're driving through Oxnard, where they have all the farms.
Well, that might be a couple of other bacteria going on. No, bad smelling bacteria is usually actually comes from Staphylococcus aureus, is one of the main strains that causes bad smells.
You just are full of all the information.
Well, I know a lot about bacteria.
Yeah, you do. And you probably psychically have all sorts of. Okay, good to know. And so, okay, nature. I think
using your body as a channel is really useful. So like if you're still in your quiet.
So those of you listening, have you used your body as a channel? Noah,
if you haven't, it's really easy. I can tell you to do it in less than a minute.
Let's go.
Yeah, basically 80% of intuitive questions that you're going to be starting yourself out with at first are yes or no. Does this person like me? Is this right for me? Is this not right for me? Yes or no, right? Like most intuition can be boiled down to yes or no. Using your body as a channel does it feel more open or more closed? I use
constriction or expansion.
Yeah, my heart cavity. If I'm sitting up with my legs folded, middle of the room, if I ask myself a question, do my shoulders roll in? Does my back roll toward the ground? That's a contraction. Is my chest expanding? Are my shoulders rolling out? Is it getting bigger? Is my back getting straighter? That's an expansion. It feels right.
Okay, so that's body language.
Yeah,
I also think it's just names, right? Yeah. So, for example, Noah, if I say Ashley Stahl, obviously massive expansion happening.
Right, exactly.
But if we say like Voldemort, closing.
It's more contracted there.
Yeah, total contraction city. Okay, well, I actually do that. And, it's funny, a lot of my friends are into this. And so when we talk, it's even our language is different. Yeah. I'll talk about a guy or a friend or a business deal. Yeah. And my friends will talk to me in a way where they'll say, he feels good. He feels good when I'm hearing you talk about him. Yeah. He doesn't feel good. Yeah. And they're literally referring to an expansion or a contraction in their body. So it's a tool, I think, for everybody to use. Another tool that I know about just from a personal development standpoint is ask your parents or, whoever raised you, what did you do when you were a kid to kind of calm your mind? My mom told me.
So interesting.
Yeah, she was like, Ashley, you're a batshit crazy kid. I was. And I got kicked out of preschool for headbutting, which a lot of people listening know. And not headbutting one person, but the entire class. And my mom said that whenever I threw on a movie, something with nature or something like, there's a movie called The Snowman, like a snowman cartoon. She said you would just check out and you would become still. And to this day, as a grown-ass woman, when I have a rough day, if I go to the movies, I access a level of decompression, of stillness, and I don't go often enough. But it's almost like I completely absorb myself in the movie and I come out so much more centered. So I think anybody listening, use this as a tool. Like, what feedback do your caretakers have about what really soothed your system and calmed your energy? Such a good thing to ask yourself. And okay, so stop listening to other people more than you listen to yourself, potentially. And then rewinding the tape. So everybody listening, Noah said, go back in time, look at those moments where you might have realized something was off, something was wrong, and take a look at, like, how did you know? Did you feel something in your body? Did you think something? Did you see an image? How did you collect that feedback that something was off?
And then, and validating it also builds confidence. And there's more than one way to do that. So, maybe you're starting to feel things more and you have a weird feeling one of your friends or their couple, they might break up. Just as an example, write it down. And then, Bob and Sarah are breaking up in 3 weeks. If you for some reason feel that way, or not even that specifically, they might break up in a month or two, or I just feel like they're breaking up. date it, and if it happens, wow, I predicted that. How did I know it, right? But also,
well, because a lot of people break up. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but if you get a good sense of it happening right before it happens.
Yeah, totally. I had that with actually a business deal. A really close friend of mine just did a partnership with someone, and immediately my body contracted. I was like, this is not a good business partnership. This isn't going to last. I feel really bad about this.
Yeah.
You
can ask specific questions. Does this person have integrity? Does this person have integrity toward their relationship with me? And you might get different answers too, right? So the more specific the target, the more specific the answer as well, which is really important.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't have to ask really complicated things. It can be simple. Like, is there a breakup? Just in the beginning to validate that what you're feeling is actually coming true. It's not just in your head. And also communicating to other partners. I think the whole thing here is that distance gives perspective. So when you're rewinding, you're giving distance because it happened a while ago. So you're not as upset that you had lost the job. When you are taking a note and forgetting about it and going back and looking and validating it, you gave some distance to it. You have the perspective like, oh, wow, actually it was right. The more emotionally attached you are to the result, the harder it is to read on. So if you're reading on something for your own life, that's actually harder in the beginning than to read for a complete stranger, because you'll really be using less information that's based on empirical evidence when you're divorced from the topic. And that information generally has an emotional charge. And when we're emotionally attached to an outcome, getting the job, getting whatever, then we're less likely to hear a clear answer because our own desired result is attached to what we're seeing somehow. But that's why I think,
rewinding is so good because you're not attached anymore. The results already happened. All right. Well, so that's a good exercise for anybody after this episode is to take out a pen and paper and think, okay, when did you know something and you didn't listen to it and it exploded anyway, or the feedback was right? Yeah. And if you could take yourself back into the memory of that knowing, how did the knowing show up for you in your heart, in your body, in your mind?
It should feel like it's just appearing or like it's pouring out. And it generally... intuition, accessing intuition is not so much training a muscle or learning how to do something. It's something that is inherently there in abundant amounts. It's in clearing the things that are passing us from noticing what's already ever present.
And okay, so moving forward, you said another step to accessing your intuition is to feel your feelings. And this is actually... I know you said this is about presence, so...
It's about presence, but it's also about permission and allowance.
Ooh, tell me more.
Yeah, because I think that we often feel like it's not good or it's not okay or that our feelings aren't safe. And we can feel however much we want to if we give ourselves permission to or we allow ourselves to. But I think that we don't because of control, which really is just another layer of fear, that we feel we need to control ourselves or control the situation or control other people's perceptions of the situation so we get what we want. But actually that control to contain ourselves stops us from seeing and blocks us from our lives actually being bigger, right? So it's about releasing our control and rigidity over how we should or shouldn't feel or how we should or shouldn't present, and not being afraid of a loss of control, actually embracing that, is where more of a feeling state comes from. And that's really where my information comes from, is my feelings. I feel like this person is being honest with you. I feel like this person's not being honest with you. It's just a feeling. Honesty feels a certain way. And when you bring up a person, I'll feel that energy and I'll feel whether or not that feels honest. It all comes from a feeling state. And it's drawing reference to when I felt lied to before. What does that feel like? And if I bring this person to that, how does that feel? It comes from feelings.
So have you ever been betrayed by your feelings where you completely misread someone? Because I think a lot of us, the fear might be, okay, let me give myself permission to believe what I think.
It's always when it comes from an attachment to a desired outcome.
Oh, fuck, that's so good. Yeah. Everybody listening, your feelings are pretty much always right. It's just when you're attached to an outcome, it's tainted.
Right, because you're not fully able to see because you don't have the distance to have the perspective, which gets us to external validation, right? More. We're all intuitive. So even if you have friends, I can't tell you how many people I've met who've never had a reading before, never done a reading before, and just meeting me, will be able to tell me things about what's going on in my life. who've never done things like this before. And that's what you just did with me right before this podcast. You'd never done a reading before in your life for someone, and you did one for me. And you heard the name of an ancestor of mine that had passed away and described how she felt, and were able to give me clarity about lots of things. And these are things
guys, this is real. Like, if you're listening, when
never, ever done or tried before in your life, and sitting down with me, who you haven't known that long, you were able to give me information that was accurate, that I could validate, that actually really helped me get clarity, that I couldn't get clarity on myself because I didn't have the distance to have the perspective for myself, which is why it's so important, even if you're really good at this and you do it for a lot of other people, to have community and to have external validation, right? Where you are practicing with partners or friends, even if they haven't done it before. Oftentimes that makes it even better because it's fresher and you have less of a story around how you do it and what it looks like.
You know, this is just giving me so many thoughts around all of the times where I've been attached to outcomes and not been able to hear myself think or feel what's actually happening. And so I'm curious, you know, just listening to you, and I had a whole nother thought that just totally left my brain, but I'm curious just listening to you. You said find ways to validate your impression. So you said rewind the tape, take a look, see how you felt, get feedback on where you talked about feeling your feelings. What are some ways to validate your impressions of things? If you have an intuition on something, how can we validate that?
Well, it depends. Like, here's an example. I had one client who was in a lawsuit and related to a business, and I said the person that you're suing stole more money than you think they did. And my client thought that this person stole money, but they actually stole more money. And I said the year that it happened and around which months in that year and around how much money, and she looked it up and it was all true. Right? So I had a feeling, I shared it, and she validated it. So it doesn't have to be that specific. Again, it could be, someone you're really good friends with. You might take the risk to say, even if you have no logical reason why, I feel like you're having a really hard time with your dad right now. And if they say, yeah, how did you know that I really am? That's a validation. That's that little feeling that, okay, I for some reason got that. I listened to it. I asked and they said it was right. And even if someone says, no, nothing's wrong, listen to the intonation. Because oftentimes people say nothing's wrong and they don't want to own nothing's wrong. So you could validate it and it could be right, or just because someone doesn't validate it, that actually doesn't mean that it's not right. Sometimes people will deny things where they feel uncomfortable, even if you feel it. So still trust yourself, even if you're not getting the validation. Try to find situations where you feel you'll get the validation you need so you can show to yourself that you're on the right track and coming closer to a sense of clarity, which is really the goal.
So those of you listening, Noah walked in, and we've met before and hung out before, and this time he walked through the door and I was kind of going through heartbreak today, which is, like, as you guys fucking know, the usual. I just stopped seeing someone that I really adored, and he walked through the door and I was like, ugh, Noah, I'm in it. Do you have any feedback? And what Noah did was actually really quite fun, that a medium has never done with me, is you said, well, what messages are you getting for me? And it was such a fun switch and surprise. And
actually really healing, because when we're acutely in pain, sometimes getting out of your own needs or the own things that are bothering you and showing up for someone else makes your problems a lot smaller. Because we're not feeding into the fear of the acute trauma. So if you give ourselves exercises of, the times where we really feel, how can I show up for anyone else? My life is such a mess right now. That's the time you really, really, really should show up for someone else, because we'll help you realize actually your life's not that big a mess. Everyone's going through something. And even while I'm going through a mess, I actually still have the capacity to help someone else. And how amazing is that?
Yeah.
And how great is that of me, that I really do have that strength, that even though my own problems are too daunting, I can still show up. And that's not in a escapist way or a self-effacing way. We're still responsible for our lives, but it makes attending to our lives easier when we don't feed the fear and think our problems are bigger than they are.
Well, or you're going to be like me when you leave at, like, Hot Mess Express. I'm going to go lie in bed and cry for a good hour. But, there's a couple things that you pointed out. Oh, and by the way, those of you listening, so he flipped it on me and he's like, do you hear any names? Do you see anything for me? And I saw Jane, maybe Jeanette. And I was too shy about it because I felt crazy because this is not something I do.
Right.
And you were like, it's not crazy. I love how you normalize it. And I'm like, that's cute that the medium is normalizing mediumship. But for every day, like, it's a very weird experience for people who don't tap into this. It's unusual. Right. So I said, I'm seeing a J and I'm seeing an A and an N. And he's like, yeah, that's the name of somebody who passed away. And I'm like, do you have a lot of people who passed away? And he said, no. And
that's the only relevant person really you could bring up that's passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he asked me what messages she had, and I just kind of like talked. It kind of feels like for me like you're just talking out of your ass, but it's coming from something, which is what you define intuition as, is knowing what you know without.
It feels that way because it doesn't have a lot of weight. It's a lighter energy, so it doesn't feel like you're talking with a lot of gravity because you're pulling it from somewhere else.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
You guys, I'm gonna be setting up my Yelp account, 5 stars on Yelp. Ashley's medium readings.
It's gonna be a whole new podcast.
Yeah.
You just discovered a whole new part of yourself.
Ashley going batshit crazy. Everybody's gonna have to sign a release before they get on the podcast. I'm gonna give them a reading, and like shit's gonna hit the fan.
But I believe we're all creators. Like, we're all conscious creators, and our words are powerful. And you know that as a writer and communicator. So what you say becomes the reality. If you say something's weird, then that's what you deem it. That's your jurisdiction of it. Mediumship's weird. If you say that's normal, then it is. And actually it is because it's natural and it happens all the time. And for me, it's normal because it's how I live my life every moment and every day. So that's my normal reality. Supernatural or paranormal energy, because it's greater than us, to give without expecting. I couldn't feel other people's feelings or understand other people's stories unless in some way I've been there. And maybe it's not the same experience or the same story, but I can't understand that you're feeling ashamed or why unless I felt shame. I can't understand what it feels like to be an outsider unless I felt that at some point. Like, but I also think that we're human, and sometimes if you love someone or something and you feel like it's supposed to be in your life, maybe you really feel like it's supposed to be in your life and you're supposed to be fighting for it for a reason too.
Yeah, but sometimes there's spiritual bypassing where people bypass the truth because they're like, it's meant to be. I'm supposed to be struggling like this. It's a part of my soul's journey for me to be with John, even though he slept with 3 strippers and stole my credit card. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where this shit comes from in my head, but that was the example I gave.
But that really happens.
Yeah.
And if you're that invested in that relationship,
that you're abandoning yourself,
you're not going to see it unless someone else tells you. But you can see enough to be open to someone else telling you.
Do you know what this reminds me of? Is I read a book called The Science of Happily Ever After, and I had a bunch of studies about relationships because what the fuck else am I doing on a Friday night than reading this? And it talked about how a study was showing that friends of couples are always much more accurate on the future and potential of that couple than the couple themselves.
That's just what we've been saying this whole time.
Yeah, that's what we were saying this whole time. Why? Because the friends are not attached to the outcome. They're attached to their friend being happy.
Yeah.
And so they look at the other person. They're probably evaluating their new partner's integrity and what they're feeling on that guy, if they feel good or bad for their friend. And so there's a neutrality, a level of detachment to the person their friend picked that allows them to see clearly. So I think what you're describing was really profound, that the reason we can't feel the accuracy of our feelings is because we attach to outcomes.
You're too close to it.
Oh, it's so hard to read the label when you're inside the jar.
I have another friend who, when she loses her keys, she'll go up to someone in the street and say randomly to a stranger, she does readings, whatever, and she'll say randomly, if you were me and you didn't know your keys more, where would you think they'd be? And just randomly will pick someone she feels she can ask and get the answer because she knows she can activate them, but she's too close to it. So I'm not the only one who has that trick up my sleeve.
Yeah, good to know. Yeah. Well, no wonder you wear.
We're all radios.
Yeah.
And sometimes the less conditioned we are to the fact that we are radios, the better we are at it.
Our little antennas are up reading information and feeling situations all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody listening, I would love to just give you an invitation right now where maybe you want to write down the top 10 people that you spend your time with, that you're around, that you have in your life, whether it's work or love or friendship, and just say their name and feel what your body does. Does it feel good? Does it feel like relief? Does it feel like contraction, expansion? I'm so curious for you. Noah, this has obviously been pretty freaking amazing. I'm curious, where can everybody find you when they want to learn more about you?
I'm on Instagram at Noah Berman. I'm Noah Berman on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And You can find me at noahbermanwellness.com. And I also have lots of healthy products that I formulate you guys can consume.
Channeled straight from the gods.
One is called Higher Mind Wellness, which is coming out in November, that I would love you guys to try. Beverages for brain health, mental clarity, focusing, and alertness.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, of course.
So fun. Hello, friends. I absolutely loved this episode, and I found Noah's thoughts on intuition and instinct to be so powerful. And those of you who think it's pretty off the wall that I sometimes kind of tap in and pick up things, I think it's pretty off the wall myself. And so it's not something that I really talk that much about or use. But sometimes I do find that it's almost like we are these little octopus, octopi. I don't even know what the plural of that is, but we have our little invisible tentacles just out feeling things all the time. And recently I had a lesson from the universe on listening to my intuition, and I'm still kind of sitting with it and remembering it. But the short of it is that I ended up going to Bali last minute with my friend Sam Skelly. And we were planning on both writing our book because we have the same publisher, a publisher called Hay House. And she's on a much tighter deadline than me, but we thought, you know what, let's go to Bali for a month and really focus on writing our book. So we get there, and the first thing she does is she rents a motorcycle, and she asked me if I was going to rent one too. And I told Sam, no, I had a friend whose dad passed away on a motorcycle. And even if I was over that, it just doesn't even look fun to me. And she was like, all right, no problem. She's super cool like that. But multiple times throughout the trip in Ubud, in Bali, in the jungle, we would be at a location that was like 20 minutes from our hotel, and I'd have to wait 20 minutes or 30 minutes for the hotel to come get me. So there's a lot of times where she'd have her motorcycle parked and she'd be about to leave a location, and I'd say, yeah, I'm going to wait for the car. Once the car comes, I'll meet you at the hotel. And so there's many times where she'd look at me and say, are you sure you could just hop on my bike? And I'd be like, yeah, it's all good. No problem. Motorcycles feel like a strong no for me. And she's so respectful. She's like, no problem. I'll see you at the hotel. So I'd wait for the car to come get me. And eventually 2 weeks into the trip, it just started to feel like kind of a drag where she was able to kind of be mobile and leave quickly, and I had to wait. So eventually I started judging myself, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just YOLO. Maybe I should try the motorcycle once. Maybe I should just, stop being so conservative about this. And so there's this one time we were at a cafe and we were going to a pool, and it was a few miles ride. And she said to me, are you sure you don't want to just hop on? It's open road. It's open jungle road. There's not traffic. There's not people. If you were to try a motorcycle, this would be the time. And I really didn't want to do it. And I really strongly felt an intuition like this isn't good for me. But for some reason, I just felt like I had something to prove. And it wasn't even to her. It was almost like to myself. I was judging myself as being someone who isn't easygoing or isn't fun, because I wasn't willing to go on a motorcycle, which is so silly because I'm super easygoing about a lot of things. And I think that's the case in life. A lot of the times we judge somebody as easygoing, as confident, as however it is. But the truth is that everybody is in some way something, and in other ways not that thing. So in my case, I'm super confident in my career. I'm super confident in my friendships. Sometimes I'm not as confident in other areas. It's like confidence doesn't go across the board. So is the case, I think, when it comes to being easygoing. Some people are easygoing in one area and not so much in another. And I think it's so silly as a society how when we talk about people, we judge them as one thing and we write it off the bat completely as that thing. So I told myself, you really got to ease up, Ash. You got to get on this. So against my intuition, I got on the motorcycle. And it was just a 2-mile ride. 5 seconds into the ride, we weren't even going that fast. Something flew into my eye. I rubbed my eye. I didn't think much of it. The day goes on. The next morning I woke up. My eye was swollen shut. I ended up having to go to the ER in Bali 3 times. A week into it, God bless the woman in the ER. She started to recognize me. She said, you come back in 3 days. I looked down at my phone and I pressed book now on Kayak and was like, I'm not coming back. I'm going to America. I need a hospital. I need to get this taken care of. And there was such a long period of time where I was in recovery, and I'm actually doing this note to you right now, this audio to you at the end of my recovery. So my eye is still swollen right now. It's been 3 weeks. I've been on house arrest. I got a virus, something that went into my eye. It swelled up my eye. My whole body was reacting to it. And it's just, I can't help but take a look at the truth, which was that I didn't want to be on the motorcycle. I had a strong intuition that motorcycles weren't for me, and I did it anyway. And I find that more often than not in life, when you really strongly feel like something's a no for you and you push past that barrier, yes, I am all about growth. Yes, I'm all about leaning into resistance. But when something feels like a hard no for you and you push past it and you don't listen to your instincts that something is good for you or not, I think that there's such a spiritual lesson there. And so in my case, I've been reflecting over the past few weeks being on complete house arrest, just going to the doctor, spending a night in the ER. Once I got off the airplane home at LAX, I went straight to the emergency room and stayed overnight there, hooked onto antibiotics. And now that I'm on the end of this crazy spiral, I just can't help but think about what is the meaning that my eye was swollen shut for 3 weeks. I lost my vision for a while. What does that really mean? So I want to end this now with you thinking about, what is a time where you felt like something was a bad idea or it was a no for you and you did it anyway? And what were the thoughts that you had as you did it anyway? What was the judgment that you had on yourself that made you push past your no and push into doing something that you really didn't want to be doing? What were you telling yourself about yourself? Because I think that usually that story you're telling yourself, in my case, I should be more easygoing. I should be more fun. I am easygoing. I am fun. It's just not with motorcycles. You should see me in the club. Anyway, I hope that this story was of support to you, and I hope this question really sits with you. This is Ashley Stahl signing off. Can't wait to connect with you next week on the U-Turn Podcast. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the U-Turn Podcast. We keep really detailed show notes at uturnpodcast.com. So if our guest mentioned a book or a resource that you're interested in, you'll be able to find that there. In the meantime, if you were inspired by this episode, if it made an impact in your life, we would be so grateful if you subscribed and posted a review for us on iTunes. Rumor has it on the street, the more reviews we get, the more subscribes we get, the more we can grow and get our impact out there in the world. In the meantime, I'd love to hear from you at Ashley Stahl on Instagram. I'm so grateful for connecting, and I look forward to next week's episode.
I've had to go through different feelings to know what they are, just like everyone else.